Singer Bob Marley, his reggae music known far beyond its roots in Jamaica, died in a Miami hospital today after a long battle against cancer.
The Jimi Hendrix experience is over. The acid rock musician died today in a London hospital, apparently from an overdose of drugs.
Perhaps everyone in this world hopes their own funeral will be solemn and beautiful. Yet there were legends who chose to leave this world with rituals that shocked all of humanity. The body of a soul queen was dressed in 3 different gowns over 3 days of visitation, while the ashes of a rap genius were scattered in a bizarre ceremony in the desert. Why did they choose such strange ways to depart? What secrets were buried deep along with their souls? And is everything we know about their deaths really the truth? In today's video, let's embark on a journey to uncover the 19 most bizarre burial rituals in the history of black music. There, every tear, every flower, every handful of earth hides a story that no one has ever told. 19. Tupac Shakur ashes, scattered on shoes and a desert oath. And the very first figure to open this strange journey is none other than Tupac Shakur, who chose for himself a truly mysterious ending in the final chapter of his life. Tupac Shakur, born Lasagne Parish Crooks in 1971, was a legendary American rap icon with hits like Dear Mama and Changes. In the early 90s, he became a symbol for an entire people's struggle, a rebellious soul that no one could ever bind. And then glory itself became the price he paid in blood. On the night of September 7, 1996, after a heated boxing match in Las Vegas, Tupac Shakur sat in the passenger seat of a black BMW. His hand clutched a baseball cap, his lips still murmuring an unfinished sentence, unaware that fate was closing in. At exactly 11:15 p.m., a white Cadillac suddenly pulled up beside them, and 5 cold bullets pierced through the glass, tearing into Tupac's chest and head. 6 days later, at the University Medical Center of Southern Nevada, Tupac drew his last breath at the age of 25, alone in the cold ICU, with no family by his side and no final words left behind. Refusing the spectacle of the outside world, Tupac's family secretly had his body cremated at a small funeral home in Las Vegas under the heavy gray mist of early dawn. But it was the ritual carried out according to Tupac Shakur's own wishes that truly shocked the world. On the night of September 15th, in a barren patch of land on the edge of the Mojave Desert, the outlaws, the brothers in arms who once called Tupac blood brother, gathered in silence. As the moon slipped behind the mountains and the only sound left was the freezing wind howling across the desert, they opened a small container holding a portion of Tupac's ashes. No words were spoken, only the pounding of heavy hearts filled the night. In that sacred moment, each of them took turns sprinkling Tupac's ashes onto their shoes. These were the very shoes that had once roamed every street corner, stormed every stage, and marched through every blood-soaked, glory-filled journey alongside him. One member whispered, "Walk with us forever, Pac." And from that freezing night onward, every step they took across the desert carried the imprint of Tupac's spirit, making him a part of their flesh, a part of their journey, a part of a rebellion that would never die out. They swore to keep that ritual secret for life, a mournful hymn reserved for the brother who had fallen a soul the world would never be able to replace. 18. Nina Simone, the woman who refused a grave. Nina Simone, born Eunice Kathleen Wayman, was an irreplaceable icon of the civil rights movement and the jazz scene of the 20th century, with unforgettable songs like Feeling Good and I Put a Spell on You. Yet few would have guessed that the woman whose voice burned like fire would choose to leave this world in silence, in chilling loneliness, and in haunting isolation. In her final years, Nina lived reclusively in a small seaside house in Carry-le-Rouet, France, far from the blinding lights of the stage. Breast cancer gnawed away at her body, while secret affairs with female colleagues from her past quietly weighed down her soul with an unspoken sorrow. Nina knew that even in death, she refused to become a spectacle for a crowd that had once cheered for her, but never truly understood her. So she left a final wish, no funeral in the traditional sense. On April 21, 2003, as the sunlight dimmed over the southern French sky, Nina Simone drew her last breath, her hand clutching a scrap of paper with the location where her ashes should be scattered, a desperate reminder of her final wish. Later, under the cover of a pitch-black night, a small group of 3 old friends, the only one still by her side, quietly carried Nina's ashes to a deserted beach. Amid the whispering waves and the cold howling wind, a woman from the group said to have been Nina's final secret lover, tremblingly opened the urn and whispered, "Be free, Nina," before letting the last of her ashes drift into the vast ocean. The remaining ashes were carried tightly across the Atlantic Ocean and secretly scattered at an old park in North Carolina, the very place where a young, impoverished Nina once played the piano, dreaming of love. Thus Nina Simone left this world without a grave, only the endless winds blowing between 2 shores like a sorrowful love song that the world would never hear again. 17. Bob Marley, the reggae king and the chilling moment of burial. Bob Marley, born Robert Nesta Marley in 1945, was revered worldwide as the king of reggae, the man who turned songs like No Woman No Cry and Redemption Song into eternal symbols of freedom and hope. Throughout the 1970s, he was not just a musician, but the very soul of a global resistance movement. Yet behind the bright lights and packed arenas, Bob Marley was quietly fighting an invisible enemy, a skin cancer that started from a small wound on his toe. Tragically adhering to his Rastafarian faith, he refused amputation, choosing instead to live under a silent death sentence. One night in 1980, while performing in New York, Bob collapsed on stage. But before thousands of fans, he still forced a smile, hiding the pain and exhaustion that were eating away at him. By the spring of 1981, when his once thick dreadlocks had thinned and his gaunt face betrayed the toll of his illness, Bob Marley passed away in Miami, leaving behind his final words, "Money can't buy life." His funeral was held with great honor in 9 Mile, Jamaica, but it was the burial itself that left the world stunned. Inside a simple wooden coffin, Bob was buried alongside his worn Gibson Les Paul guitar, his beloved Bible, and a tattered Ethiopian flag. On the day of his burial, the Jamaican sky turned heavy and gray, and fierce gusts of wind tore across the hills as if the earth itself resisted letting him go. Family and thousands of local mourners stood around the hillside, frozen in silence, as the coffin slowly sank into the ground. And in the instant it touched the cold earth, many said they simultaneously felt a sudden chill run through them, as if Bob Marley's soul had left this world with one final resonant note. 16. Michael Jackson, the mysterious figure at the funeral. Perhaps everyone knows about the death of the king of pop, Michael Jackson, but there are mysteries surrounding his funeral that remain unexplained to this day. Michael Joseph Jackson, born in 1958, shook the world with his timeless moonwalk, the legendary album Thriller, and 15 Grammy Awards. Yet behind the dazzling lights was a soul, imprisoned, a child who grew up under brutal pressure, masked behind layers of perfection the world demanded. On the night of June 24, 2009, in the cold room of Holmby Hills, Michael slipped into an eternal sleep after a fatal injection administered by his personal doctor, Conrad Murray. 2 days earlier, he had whispered chilling words to his assistant, "If I don't wake up, remember that I'm too tired to go on." On July 7, 2009, the Staples Center transformed into a shrine to bid farewell to a music legend. 7,500 people fought for tickets, clinging to their last chance to see him once more. Michael's body, resting in a heavy gold-plated casket, was guarded like a national treasure. Mariah Carey sobbed uncontrollably, Lionel Richie bowed his head in silent grief, and Stevie Wonder sang a final farewell, every note cutting like a blade through the mourners. Amidst a sea of tears, when all eyes were locked on the stage, a mysterious figure face, completely covered quietly, placed a single white flower atop the casket and vanished without a trace, leaving behind an eerie silence. 15. James Marshall Hendrix, The Strange Monument. James Marshall Hendrix, legendary guitarist of the 20th century, born in 1942, was the man who left the world breathless with wild, electrifying riffs in Purple Haze and All Along the Watchtower. Yet even that blinding glory couldn't hide the exhaustion gnawing at the lonely artist's soul. On the morning of September 18, 1970, in a cold hotel room in London, Jimi was found lifeless. His life ended in a sorrowful overdose of sleeping pills. A silent, painful death like the last broken notes he once played. And at his funeral, a supernatural phenomenon occurred, one that no one has been able to explain to this day. The ceremony took place at Greenwood Memorial Park, but it was unlike any funeral the world had ever seen. Friends, family, and legendary rock comrades gathered, yet there were no wailing cries, no long-winded speeches. Only the sound of the wind howling through the pine trees, tear-reddened eyes, and a suffocating heavy silence. At the center of the cemetery, Jimi's family had erected a strange monument, a giant granite guitar standing lonely against the gray sky. When Jimi's ashes were laid to rest at the base of the stone guitar, it is said that a sudden gust of wind stirred and the cold granite strings seemed to emit a mournful wail, as if the heavens themselves were playing one last ballad for the fallen musical genius. 14. Aretha Franklin, the last queen, draped in 3 eternal dresses. Aretha Louise Franklin, born in 1942, was crowned the Queen of Soul, an immortal voice behind powerful anthems like Respect and Chain of Fools, sweeping up Grammy Awards and solidifying her place in the annals of American music history. But every spotlight has its price. On August 16, 2018, her small Detroit mansion turned chillingly silent as Aretha drew her final breath after years of quietly battling pancreatic cancer. No song echoed anymore, only the absolute stillness, like the last unfinished note of a symphony. When her funeral at Greater Grace Temple began, the world witnessed a ritual unlike anything seen before. Aretha was dressed in 3 lavish gowns over the course of 3 days of public viewing. First, a powerful red gown, then a golden one fit for royalty, and finally, a pure white one, each dress a chapter deeply etched into her life's history. It is said that during the final wardrobe change, a mortuary worker whispered, stunned, "She looks as if she's still breathing." And many believed that Aretha had orchestrated her own eternal performance, dressing immortality itself in layers of sumptuous fabric. 13. Prince, the eccentric icon who built his own secret shrine. If Aretha Franklin was the final display of royal grandeur, then Prince Rogers Nelson, born in 1958, the eccentric king behind Purple Rain and When Doves Cry, chose a much colder exit. On April 21, 2016, inside the sprawling Paisley Park estate he built as his personal sanctuary, Prince collapsed from a fentanyl overdose. But what no one was prepared for was the way he left this world. Prince's ashes were preserved inside a miniature replica of Paisley Park, shimmering like a gem, sealed behind glass, accessible only to his closest confidants. Rumors swirled that hidden within the model were unreleased recordings waiting to be discovered. It was as if Prince, even in death, insisted on controlling who could touch the truth of his music. Some wondered perhaps his entire eccentric life had been leading up to the most flawless disappearing act of the century. 12. James Brown, When Death Couldn't End Human Greed. And while Prince chose a proud disappearance, James Joseph Brown, the godfather of soul, born in 1933, was dragged into a final tragedy by those closest to him. On December 25, 2006, amid the biting cold of Christmas Day, James Brown drew his last breath at Emory Crawford Long Hospital in Atlanta after years of battling heart failure and pneumonia complications. But the real tragedy did not lie in his death. Instead of resting peacefully in the arms of loved ones, James's body became the center of a fierce legal battle, unlike any ever seen. Ex-wives, children, lovers, and even former lawyers all scrambled for pieces of the vast empire he left behind, from real estate and song rights to unreleased works. The chaos kept his body held at the funeral home for nearly 2 months, unable to be buried. 5 days later, a grand memorial service was held at the Apollo Theater in Harlem, the very place where James first stepped onto the stage back in 1956. However, it was essentially just a public viewing ceremony. Inside the gleaming bronze casket, James Brown lay still, his face carefully made up, as if he were still smiling. Yet no one knew that behind the sparkling glass, fierce arguments over money were raging on, with some even proposing to move his body elsewhere for safekeeping until the disputes could be resolved. A security guard at the Apollo Theater later recounted, every night after the venue plunged into darkness, they heard faint footsteps echoing through the halls, as if James Brown himself was desperately trying to escape the second life he never asked for. And so for 65 days, James Brown remained imprisoned by worldly greed long after his soul had left. 11. Whitney Houston, the white microphone and a spiritual omen. Whitney Houston, born in 1963, with a voice so heavenly it silenced the world through timeless ballads like I Will Always Love You and 6 glittering Grammys. Yet even that dazzling light couldn't save a soul that slowly crumbled under invisible wounds. Amidst the thunderous applause, Whitney lived the life of a lonely woman torn apart by drugs, broken love affairs, and the crushing weight of fame. On February 11, 2012, just hours before a Grammy pre-party, Whitney was found dead in the bathtub of the Beverly Hilton Hotel, Los Angeles. The cause was quickly ruled as drowning influenced by drug use and heart disease. But what haunted the world even more than her sudden death was the way she was finally laid to rest. On February 18, 2012, at New Hope Baptist Church, where she had first lifted her angelic voice as a little girl, Whitney Houston returned, placed inside a gold-plated casket, dressed in a pure white wedding gown, as if preparing for her final marriage, but this time to death itself. Amid the choked sobs of loved ones, a piano played her favorite gospel hymns, and the entire church was flooded with a heavy sense of sorrow and helplessness. Stranger still, the moment her casket touched the ground, the white microphone, her inseparable companion in her final years, suddenly fell from the hand of the officiant, crashing loudly onto the floor, freezing the entire church into stunned silence. It was as if a 10. Marvin Gaye, the Prince of Soul, returns to the ocean. Marvin Pence Gaye Jr., the Prince of Soul, melted the hearts of millions during the 70s with masterpieces like Let's Get It On and What's Going On. But on April 1, 1984, just one day before his 45th birthday, he was shot dead by his own father in the family home in Los Angeles during a burst of uncontrollable rage. The news spread like wildfire, shocking the entire soul music world. On the day of his funeral, the atmosphere at Forest Lawn Memorial Park was heavy with an unprecedented silence. No music played, only the choked sobs of thousands of fans crowding outside the gates. Inside the chapel, the simple casket was covered with a white cloth, just as Marvin had always wished for peace he never truly found in life. One shocking detail left everyone speechless. The father who had pulled the trigger was nowhere to be seen, while Marvin's mother trembled throughout the ceremony, clutching her son's portrait as if afraid the world would steal even the last memories of him. When his ashes were scattered into the California Ocean, the waves that day seemed to crash louder than ever, like a final cry for a genius who died in utter heartbreak. 9. Rick James, The Wildest Farewell Party in Hollywood. Perhaps on this list, Rick James had the wildest funeral of them all. A funk legend whose hit, Super Freak, exploded through the 80s, he didn't just electrify music with his wild rhythms, but also with a lifestyle that challenged every boundary. Even in death, Rick refused to be bound by cold traditional rituals. On August 6, 2004, Rick died of heart failure. His funeral at Hollywood Forever Cemetery was unlike any memorial ever seen. According to his wishes, guests were asked to bring alcohol blast funk music loudly and not cry. Amid overflowing drinks, laughter mixed with quickly wiped away tears, one shocking moment stood out. Rick's best friend and musical companion poured liquor directly onto the top of the casket as a rebellious farewell. As Super Freak played one last time, everyone raised their glasses and screamed his name as if Rick's spirit was dancing wildly one final time among the world he had set ablaze with his music and untamable swagger. 8. B.B. King, The Funeral and the No-Touch Rule. B.B. King, the king of the blues, who turned his guitar Lucille into the very symbol of heartfelt sorrow with "The Thrill Is Gone," lived, loved, and suffered through every single note his entire life. But on May 14, 2015, that great heart finally stopped beating after a long battle with diabetes and kidney failure. When preparing for the funeral in Indianola, Mississippi, where he first raised his voice, B.B. King left behind a chilling and shocking request: "No one is allowed to touch Lucille even after I am gone." His beloved guitar was placed right beside his body inside a separate glass case, protected like a sacred relic. During the funeral, no loud cries were heard, and no one dared to reach out to Lucille. Only the soft, sorrowful blues drifted through the air like whispered farewells. Then a haunting moment struck an old friend. Trembling, almost placed his hand on the guitar out of habit, but stopped midair and burst into tears. The entire church fell into an eerie silence. B.B. King had departed, taking Lucille with him as an inseparable part of his soul. Perhaps he wanted to remind the world forever that some loves are too sacred to ever be touched, even by death. 7. Luther Vandross, The Mystery of the Sealed Casket. Luther Ronzoni Vandross Jr., born in 1951, was hailed as the golden voice of R&B, with love songs like "Dance with My Father" that touched millions of hearts and earned him 8 Grammy Awards. Yet the light of his love songs was not enough to illuminate the silent battles he faced during his final years, the complications of a devastating stroke. On July 1, 2005, at a hospital in Edison, New Jersey, Luther drew his last breath quietly, just as he had hidden all his scars throughout his life. The world mourned, but few knew that according to his absolute last wishes, the cause of his death was to remain strictly confidential until after the funeral. On the day of the service at Frank E. Campbell Funeral Chapel in New York, his casket was sealed shut without a viewing window, like a fortress guarding all his secrets. No one was allowed to see Luther's face one last time. Only soft gospel music drifted through the chapel, offering an unnamed farewell. And right at the moment, the priest lowered his voice to recite the final words. A strange light swept across the church dome, making everyone present shudder. Perhaps that was the very moment Luther's soul soared away, offering a final goodbye the world would never hear again. 6. Barry White, The Eternal Whisper of Love. Barry White, born in 1944, the deepest bass voice in the world, turned every lyric into a whispered promise of love, enchanting the entire world with songs like "Can't Get Enough of Your Love, Babe." But on July 4, 2003, that mighty heart fell silent from kidney failure, leaving the music world awash in sorrow. At Calvary Hill Cemetery, his funeral unfolded in a way no one had anticipated. Not a single white flower of mourning was allowed. A peculiar rule was laid down at the door. Anyone carrying white lilies, a symbol of farewell, or wearing traditional funeral attire was turned away. A longtime fan clutching a bouquet of white lilies burst into sobs outside the chapel when denied entry. Barry's casket was draped in black velvet solemn under the dim lights. As his final song, "Never Never Gonna Give You Up," played, a soft breeze swept through, carrying a single red rose petal that floated down onto the casket. And so Barry White, the prince of timeless love songs, departed, just like his music, gentle, passionate, and eternally undying. 5. Phyllis Hyman, The Funeral Without a Farewell. Phyllis Hyman, the R&B and jazz singer, born in 1949, once lit up the Harlem stage with music that was both powerful and fragile, yet it was also in that city where she chose to end her life in absolute solitude. On June 30, 1995, just hours before a scheduled performance, Phyllis left the world by overdosing on sleeping pills, leaving behind one chilling farewell note: "Let me go without anyone trying to hold me back." That strange message left her family and friends bewildered, and they ultimately decided to hold a funeral unlike anything ever seen before. At a small chapel in Harlem, her service had no guest list. Anyone who came to pay respects had to stand outside peering into an empty room through a fogged glass pane. There were no chairs, no candles, no flowers. Only a single microphone stood on a bare wooden stand, as if waiting for a final song that would never be sung. And when the casket was taken away, there was no procession, no mourning crowd. Only an open sunlit courtyard remained, where the wind spiraled into the empty space, carrying away everything left unsaid. Phyllis Hyman left this world exactly as she lived, proud, solitary, and defiant, against a world that never truly understood her soul. 4. Donnie Hathaway, The Secret Funeral and the Haunted Song. Donnie Hathaway, born in 1945, a soul genius who warmed the hearts of the world with A Song for You and This Christmas, became the voice of lonely souls seeking light in the darkness. Yet it was that very world he trusted that ultimately drowned him in despair. On January 13, 1979, Donnie fell from the 15th floor of the Essex House Hotel amid rumors that have never been clarified. Was it an accident suicide or a sinister hand that pushed him? In Chicago, his funeral was held with an unprecedented ritual. The family not only sealed the casket, but also covered the entire crypt with thick black velvet curtains allowing no light to penetrate, as if shielding Donnie's soul from the prying eyes of the living. Instead of flowers, mourners brought old handkerchiefs, each one a symbol of the private sorrows Donnie once sang about. Inside the casket, a small cassette player, his companion from the days he sang on the streets, softly played an unfinished hymn. When his body was lowered into the ground, a chilling event occurred. The cemetery lights suddenly flickered violently, as if the heavens themselves were protesting. And it is said that those who lingered late into that cold night heard a faint broken song rising from the earth, Donnie's voice forever interrupted, halfway. 3. Gil Scott-Heron, The Last Poem Swept Away by the Wind. Gil Scott-Heron, born in 1949, hailed as the godfather of rap, turned poetry and soul into piercing arrows aimed at the heart of social injustice, with masterpieces like The Revolution Will Not Be Televised. Yet that rebellious soul could not escape tragedy. In his final years, Gil battled HIV, AIDS, and drug addiction, quietly losing pieces of himself day by day. On May 27, 2011, at St. Luke's Roosevelt Hospital in New York, he drew his last breath alone, leaving the world unaware it had just lost one of its fiercest voices. Gil's funeral took place in an old Harlem church, but the ritual was hauntingly strange. As per his final wish, his friends each stepped up to the pulpit to read exactly one line of a poem he had once written, then dropped it into a wooden box placed before his casket. The church filled with the soft rustle of papers and broken whispers, as if desperately trying to piece together a soul that had shattered. When the box overflowed with lines of poetry, a sudden gust of wind blew the scraps upward, swirling them into little cyclones that shot out the open church windows. Everyone stood frozen, watching the last verses of Gil Scott-Heron being swept away by the wind, just like his life rebellious, drifting and forever belonging to no grave. 2. Etta James, The Final Scent of Perfume. Etta James, the godmother of soul and the legendary voice behind At Last, passed away on January 20, 2012, after a brave battle with leukemia. But as if her life had never been anything ordinary, Etta's death was also prepared with a strange final wish. Her body had to be dressed in the simplest white dress without a trace of extravagant jewelry. Most importantly, before the casket was sealed, her entire body had to be anointed with Chanel No. 5 perfume. It was the scent she believed would guide her soul to heaven. On the day of her funeral at the City of Refuge Church in Gardena, the entire space was filled with that faint, elegant fragrance. Outside, thousands of fans lined up in the cold. Inside, there were no loud cries, no wailing, only red-rimmed eyes, and a heavy silence, as if everyone were listening to one final ballad. As the white velvet-covered casket was slowly lowered, a gentle breeze carried the scent of Chanel across the church's dome, causing many to look up in awe. That was the moment when Etta James truly left this world, not with screams, not with tears, but with the one thing she had pursued all her life: pure, everlasting beauty. 1. Isaac Hayes, the final spotlight on stage. Isaac Hayes, the king of funk with his shining bald head and dazzling golden cape, set the 1970s on fire with hits like Theme from Shaft. On August 10, 2008, the world was stunned by the news of his sudden death from a stroke at his home in Memphis. Yet what truly made his funeral legendary was his bizarre final request. Isaac demanded that his body be placed inside a solid gold coffin positioned at the very center of the city's biggest stage, under spotlights, blazing like in his days of glory. On August 18, 2008, at Hope Presbyterian Church, thousands gathered, but no one was allowed to cry. Isaac's funk music blasted at full volume, turning the atmosphere into a grand celebration rather than a funeral. People believed that Isaac Hayes had departed, carrying with him his own unique halo, radiant, defiant, and never willing to dim. And so Isaac Hayes, the man who chose the stage lights as his resting place, became the final soul to close today's strange journey. 19 names, 19 ceremonies, each one a different way of leaving, but all sharing one thing in common. They did not choose to die in an ordinary way. They left as if staging one last performance where every falling petal, every sigh became a permanent part of music history. And what about you? Which burial ritual sent chills down your spine? Was it Tupac's ashes, scattered across shoes in the desert, the mysterious figure by Michael Jackson's coffin, or Gil Scott-Heron's final poem, Swept Away by the Wind? Leave a comment below, and if you want to continue exploring more thrilling, haunting, and untold stories of other legends, don't forget to hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our next extraordinary journeys.